Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nathan from the Three-Handed Bandits back with another video for you today. The next episode of our Power Surge series, which is unveiling our 2025 NFL Power Rankings. Today, we're going to be discussing the 31st ranked New York Jets. Man, the Jets and the Browns are two of the worst teams in football. Who would have guessed? Probably anybody that's watched football for the last 25 years. But yeah, no kidding. The Jets obviously are coming off a poor season, and obviously, I do not think going forward they're going to be much better. But let's go ahead and get straight into it. So, first of all, we're going to be talking about their 2024 season. In order to know where we're going, I think it's very important to contextualize the 2024 season to explain how we got to the position that we're in now. So they had a 5-12 record and they went 6-11 against the spread. So they were not one of the true bottom feeders of the league, but they still were not a very good group overall. A lot was discussed about Aaron Rodgers and kind of all the drama that he brings kind of wherever he goes. And their offense was 25th in points per game and 24th in yards per game. So it wasn't one of the like true crappy offenses, but it was definitely one of the worst ones, kind of mid tier below average. Uh, it's funny though, because they actually graded out higher on offense than they did on defense according to PFF. And Aaron Rodgers was actually QB 15 according to PFF. So I think if you talk to most people, they're really going to blame Aaron Rodgers for why they struggled so much. But in actuality, I think a lot of the issues really come down to the coaching and culture that Robert Saleh had really been building there for years. I was never a huge Robert Saleh fan. Kind of the way he bungled the Zach Wilson situation really made me doubt his culture and his leadership skills as an overall head coach, as opposed to just focusing on the defense. Because clearly, as a defensive mind, I do think he is one of the better minds in the league. But when it comes to the leadership and being the front man for an entire organization, I just don't think that he is the person that you want to be doing that for you. And so their defense was third in yards per game and 20th in points per game. So it was a solid defense. I mean, they weren't allowing a whole lot of yards, but still were allowing a good amount of points. So overall, it's just a big dud year that led to them cleaning house on the coaching staff and really a lot of pieces as well for the rest of the team. So now let's go ahead and talk about their offseason, kind of what they did to fix their team. So the first big thing we need to talk about is Justin Fields, bringing him in as the quarterback replacement for Aaron Rodgers. I will discuss Justin Fields more in depth. However, as I said, Aaron Rodgers was quarterback 15 according to PFF, and I just don't think he was the issue that really plagued this team last year. And so bringing in Justin Fields for an offense that was already kind of below average, don't think is going to do any helping. They also spent some early draft capital on Mason Taylor and Armin Mabu, as well as bringing in Josh Reynolds, a mid-round pick on Arian Smith, as well as bringing in Josh Myers on the interior offensive line. So I don't know if they did any amazing pickups to help this team for this immediate coming up season. Maybe 2 to 3 years, some of these picks can pan out, but you're talking day one impacts. I think there's a few and far between. And it really doesn't help that they lost Aaron Rodgers, as I mentioned, but Devontae Adams and Morgan Moses, who are 3+ starters, and then Tyler Conklin and Mike Williams. Conklin was a solid base level tight end. Mike Williams obviously is now retired. Wasn't really super productive for them last year, so they're not really missing much there. But overall, I do think this offense got weaker. And when you're talking about an offense that already struggled last year at times, I don't know if getting worse on that side of the ball is going to help this team suddenly be better in the win column. And as we transition to the defense, there was actually a lot more moving parts here than you kind of would expect. So they bring in Derek Nottie, Jay Tufele, Byron Cowart, and Tyler Barton for that defensive line. They said goodbye to Javon Kinlaw and Solomon Thomas, who were two kind of okay rotational pieces, and Hassan Reddick, who obviously just did not want to be there. They also bring in Francisco Mauigoa, I'm going to call him, as they say goodbye to CJ Mosley. But in the secondaries, where we see a lot of change in Brandon Stevens, Azariah Thomas, Andre Cisco, and Malachi Moore, while saying goodbye to DJ Reed, Brandon Eccles, Chuck Clark, Jalen Mills, and Ashton Davis. So a lot of change in that secondary. While they keep a lot of the core pieces, such as Quinn Williams and Sauce Gardner, they I think, kind of get a little bit worse around the edges, but you're also saying goodbye to someone like Hassan Reddick, who clearly just never wanted to be there in the first place. So overall, I think defensively, definitely could have been a lot worse. So now, as we go ahead and kind of talk about their offseason, kind of recap it as a whole, as I said, Justin Fields is just not an upgrade. It's a downgrade, frankly, for really talking about it. And we add a bad roster with Justin Fields. I think the only recipe you get there is having a bad offense. I do think the defense got worse, so it's going to be up to Aaron Glenn to really try to improve this unit, which I don't know if I would have gone with him as my coaching hire. I really think those Detroit defenses really just weren't as good as maybe they got the credit for. It was a couple of years of kind of having struggling defenses for last year was kind of their best season. And then they get absolutely demolished by Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels, and the Commanders in the playoffs. So going forward, I think he's going to be almost like a Robert Saleh or a Matt Eberflus, kind of just one of these guys who just doesn't really pan out kind of as you would hope for your coaching staff. So now as we kind of talk about this offense in more depth, obviously we're going to have to start off with Justin Fields. And look, at this point in his career, he clearly hasn't figured it out, and I'm just not expecting him to. When it comes to the actual drop back passing game, he is the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. He is super, super amazing with his feet, and he does have a really strong arm. The issue is just his accuracy is sporadic. He's a first read quarterback, and he just can't play within the structure of the offense. And at this point in his career, year 4, year 5, I'm not expecting him to suddenly have figured it out. And there's been reports that he's been struggling in preseason camp so far. So I'm telling you now, Tyrod Taylor will play this year. I'm thinking he's probably going to play at least 2 to 3, and that's even if Justin Fields is healthy the entire season. I think at some point he is going to get benched. When you start talking about your depth, though, you got Tyrod Taylor, Adrian Martinez, who lit up the UFL. So, I mean, not a whole lot of excitement in this quarterback room, really at all. So I think you're kind of hoping for just decent bridge and play, and then maybe next year is when we kind of target our quarterback for the future. When it comes to more of your playmakers, you do have Garrett Wilson, who, if you're going to have a quarterback who's a first read and run quarterback, having a wide receiver like Garrett Wilson is a really good option to have. He's someone who can win to all levels. He's got good speed and is able to get separation. So I think he's actually going to have a pretty productive season. But if teams kind of start doubling him, this offense is going to struggle, especially this passing offense, because your other options are Josh Reynolds, Alan Lazard, Tyler Johnson, Malachi Corley. Like, we're just not getting a whole lot there. Josh Reynolds, I think best case scenario is your number 4. Alan Lazard is horrible if Aaron Rodgers is not throwing him the ball. Maybe Tyler Johnson, now that he's getting more playing time, maybe he'll figure it out. But then Malachi Corley, he just struggled last year as a rookie, so who knows what we're getting from those 4. But it's probably not going to be very productive. Tight end, I think Mason Taylor is an interesting piece here. Justin Fields has seemed to like his tight ends in the past with Cole Kmet, so maybe he could have a solid rookie season. But I don't know if he's going to be sort of a dynamic like Trey McBride, Kittle, maybe not even Hawkinson, like just not a super productive tight end, at least not as a rookie. And then Jeremy Ruckert, Stone Smart, rotational tight ends, not expecting a whole lot there. Breece Hall is a super good pass catching running back, but I don't know if he's kind of just been checked out or just playing through injuries, but he hasn't quite been what he was his rookie year. So while I do think he'll be productive as a receiving back, that also requires Justin Fields to make his progressions and find the check down, which, I'm not sure how capable of that he's going to be. And then when you talk about the actual running game, as I said, if he's losing a step and Braylon Allen is someone you're excited for, maybe Breece Hall may not have the most productive season on the ground. However, they do have a pretty solid offensive line, a young offensive line, who I don't think in the 2025 season we're going to be talking about as kind of elite, but within the next 2 to 3 seasons could really grow and develop to be a top 5 unit. Like, they have a lot of potential, starting with Olu Fashanu. who they drafted last season at left tackle, Armin Mabu, who they drafted this year in the first round. So they got two highly touted tackles, two young tackles. And then on the interior, you got Elijah Vera Tucker, who's definitely not elite, but has been a pretty solid above average guard in his time in the NFL so far. John Simpson is probably your weakest here, but he's still an above average offensive line. And then Joe Tippmann had a good year last year and could probably keep growing and develop into one of the better centers in the league. So I do think that is going to help the floor of this offense. It's really going to help provide a decent ground game for the offense and try to do its best to protect Justin Fields while he decides to go running around and do crazy stuff like he does. It is a little thin though. Outside of Josh Myers, you're really not talking about a whole lot of depth. So we do need this offensive line to stay healthy, or that could breed trouble. Now, as we start talking about the defense, they really kind of have a fall from grace for where they were a couple seasons ago when they were like the best defense. And part of it is I think this defensive line is just lacking the depth that made those defenses so great. Because those old defenses, I mean, they were able to rotate people in and out and had probably 10 guys deep. Now on the interior, you're talking about Quinnen Williams and kind of three okay rotational pieces in Cowart, Nadi, and Tufele. And then on the edge, you have Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson, Tyler Barton, Michael Clemens. Like, you don't have that fear factor that you had a couple seasons ago. And so it's really going to determine, Quinnen Williams is going to determine how good this defense can be. When he was playing up to kind of a all-pro caliber level, this defense was a lot better. But as he kind of starts taking a step back, the entire defense is going to take a step back with him as well. And then on the edge, you're not really expecting much. Like Will McDonald's can be decent at getting after the quarterback, and Michael Clemens will be able to play those early downs to stop the run for him. And then Jermaine Johnson coming off an injury, who knows what we can kind of expect from him or how long is it going to take him kind of get up to full speed. And then Tyler Barton, he's going to be one of the lowest guys on the totem pole, so I'm really not expecting much from him in his rookie season. So I do think this defensive line, as I said, it's good, but it's not great like it used to be, and part of the reason why that defense was so great a couple seasons ago. And then in the linebacker room, Quincy Williams, I mean, he's still a stud. You know, he's not Roquan Smith, Demario Davis, but he's still a very talented linebacker. And then you have Jermaine Sherwood, who's another good piece. So you got two young, fast linebackers who are going to run around, make some plays, and really help this defense. And then Jamin Davis, former first-round pick, never quite figured it out, but theoretically still has some upside, and could still probably play decent rotational minutes, platooning with these other two guys. Now, the secondary is where I kind of start getting worried because it's a pretty unremarkable group outside of Sauce Gardner. Now, obviously, Sauce Gardner is worst case a top three cornerback in the league. You know, even though he had a down season last season, he's still one of the best cornerbacks in the league from a physical aspect, from a technical aspect. Like he just really does everything that you expect from a true number one lockdown corner. And in today's modern NFL with all the passing and the motions and stuff, like you're just never going to be a career lockdown corner. There's a lot of variance naturally in this position. So I would expect him to play better than he did last season and prove to everybody, oh yeah, he's Sauce fucking Gardner. But the other pieces where I start getting worried, you got Michael Carter, who's a decent slot corner, but he's not really anything more than that. And then Brandon Stevens, Azariah Thomas, Isaiah Oliver, who's going to be able to step up and give you solid play as that second corner on the other side of Sauce. And then your safety group, Tony Adams, Andre Cisco, Malachi Moore. You know, Tony Adams and Andre Cisco have not been super spectacular safeties. They're very base level starter. So maybe Malachi Moore can come in and give you kind of some better high end play. But as a rookie, not necessarily expecting a whole lot from him to begin with. Alrighty, now I'm going to go ahead and welcome you to the Fantasy Control Room. This is where we begin discussing all things fantasy football. And we're going to start off with Garrett Wilson, who's currently being drafted about wide receiver 15 in PPR formats. This kind of range of wide receivers in the draft there's not great pieces that I'm necessarily targeting. Um, so I do actually think that Garrett Wilson isn't terrible value. Um, he's going to get a lot of targets because, as we said, Justin Fields is first read and run. But with Justin Field as your quarterback, I'm still a little bit worried about his upside. We saw DJ Moore had a great season with him a couple of years ago. So I think that's kind of what his high comp could be, something like what DJ Moore was a couple years ago. In this range, I might probably target Mike Evans or Devontae Adams instead. I think they're going to be in much more prolific passing offenses. So I think they have a higher end, or at least a safer floor to get to that higher end. I do think Garrett Wilson could have a really good season, but with Justin Fields as your quarterback, I don't really know what that's going to entail. Next up, as we discuss Breece Hall, he's RB14 currently in PPR formats, but with Fields being there, I think it's going to hurt his value. So I think there's kind of a low touchdown upside, which that is the best way to be a productive fantasy football player is to score touchdowns. So if you're not scoring touchdowns, I think that price tag might be a little bit too rich, at least for me. So instead, I would target people like Chase Brown, Joe Mixon, Chuba Hubbard. I think are going to be true bell cow backs. We're not going to have to worry about having touchdowns kind of vultured from them like Breece Hall probably is going to have to. So now as you kind of start talking about some other players, Justin Fields is QB10. I mean, if you're doing a single quarterback league, I think that's decent value. He's going to be able to run if he's scoring touchdowns. He's going to score points. However, if you start doing super flex leagues or two quarterback leagues, I would probably find someone else to draft instead of him. Josh Reynolds and Alan Lazard, wide receivers 171 and 129. Absolutely no value. Do not touch them. And then Mason Taylor at tight end 27, actually I do think is really great value. Probably in more deeper leagues and definitely in a dynasty and a regular 10-man redraft league. He may not be able to produce enough early enough for him to kind of be worth a roster spot. But if you're a solid team, having someone like him on the bench theoretically could have some upside if he could have some chemistry with Justin Fields. I think is definitely worth a late round flyer pick. So now let's go ahead and talk about their schedule. And I think they got a brutal draw as well. Definitely not quite as bad as Cleveland's, but you open up with Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and having to go on the road to Tampa Bay. So you have to go against two of the best teams in the AFC and then go on the road to one of the better NFC teams. Not a great start. And then you have to go on the road to Miami when it's still going to be hot. So I think you're probably starting off with 4 straight losses between Dallas, Denver, Carolina, and then going on the road to Cincinnati. Maybe they can steal one against Dallas or Carolina, but I think we're at least coming out of there with 2 more losses. So I think we're heading into our bye week 2-6. So not a great start. Coming off the bye, home game against Cleveland, I think, is their first true winnable. They should be the favorite in this game. But then they have to go on the road to New England, on the road to Baltimore, so 2 good teams in the AFC. I think Atlanta is no slouch. Another divisional game against Miami. Luckily, their schedule lines up here just a little bit, having to go on the road to Jacksonville, on the road to the Saints, 2 teams I'm not super worried about. But then you end with New England and on the road in Buffalo. So I think their ceiling is honestly probably 5 wins. I'm saying we steal one against Dallas, week 10 against Cleveland. I'll give you week 14 against Miami, and then New Orleans and the Jags. I'm gonna say is probably your 5 if you get to 5-12. I really don't see any way in which they hit 6 or more. Honestly, I do think they have a true floor of maybe stealing one against Dallas or Carolina, maybe stealing one against Miami, and then winning that home game against Cleveland. So I do think they have a true legit floor of going 2-15 and having the first overall pick. So as we get to our cover story, when we start talking everything betting, when it comes to their over-under for the season, I am slamming the under. I just do not really see where they get 6 wins from. They're currently plus 1,600 odds to win their division. I think I have a better chance of being struck by lightning every day for the rest of my life than they do of winning their division. Making the playoffs, winning the Super Bowl, absolutely no chance. If you bet those, you were just burning money. Justin Fields, I do think under 14 and a half passing touchdowns is good value. I do think he can get over 14 and a half total touchdowns, but I think a lot of his production getting in the end zone is probably going to be rushing, not passing. And then Breece Hall, I feel like he's kind of taken a step back with an offense that I think is going to have its struggles. Justin Fields, I just don't really trust him to have a super productive yard and get over that 924 and a half mark. So I'm kind of fading Breece Hall, at least from a betting aspect. So now when we get to the Scorch Report, this is where we start giving our hottest takes of the year. And I don't even know how hot of a take this is. But Justin Fields, as I said, I don't think he's going to finish the season as the starter for the Jets. I think he probably gets you a solid 12 games, but I think Tyrod Taylor is going to take us home. And then Justin Fields will be finding his fourth new team in as many seasons. He just doesn't have it in between ears. He hasn't figured it out. So, despite his rocket arm and his great speed, if you're missing throws and you're not playing within the structure of the offense, you're just not going to be able to make it in this league. Maybe he can have some miracle run with Garrett Wilson, who helped him get overdrafted in the first place back in college at Ohio State. But I just don't have any faith in Justin Fields to be a productive player in the 2025 season, or frankly, ever. So, with that being said, I do think Justin Fields will no longer be the Jets' starting quarterback towards the end of the season. And so that is everything I have for you today on the New York Jets. Please go ahead and let me know if I am too high, too low. Just go ahead and drop your comments down below. Let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We got 30 more teams to make a video on, and we have about 30 days to the NFL season starts. So there's going to be a lot of content coming your way. So if you want to check out that as it comes out, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks, all.